I am glad you are here and glad to be with you. I know a lot about this congregation through two special people in my life, and then also Russ and Chris. What makes family work? Every one of us has seen it from time to time. You see a family here, and it's not that they don't have problems, but somehow or another the family seems to get through it. They seem to work through it. But then there's a family over here that it seems like they fall down and break their eyelash, and they're about to fall apart. And you look at different families in the world and you wonder, why does this one seem to work and this one doesn't? Back in the early 1980s, some of us, my dad, are old enough to remember back that far, the trend in research was to try to figure out what was wrong. So what a lot of therapists and counselors would do was go in and find a family that wasn't functional and go in and try and figure out what was wrong, and then the therapist, the expert in the field, would say, okay, here's what you're doing wrong and this is what you should do. And that was a trend not just in marriage and family research, but in research in general. But in walked a fella named Nick Stenay. And Dr. Stenay had a different approach. He said, I really don't care what's wrong with the family. I want to know why this family seems to work and this one doesn't. And he spent the better part of the next 30 years going into families that he deemed to be functional families. Families that worked. Families that, it's not that they didn't have problems, but they got through it. And he would go in and interview them together, interview the different members of the families. Now he's gone into Europe and even into South America. And what he has discovered is that functional families have 6 qualities, 6 characteristics, 6 common themes that he saw in his research of literally hundreds of different families. Now, friends, what I want you to know is these families weren't different. They weren't unique. He interviewed families that had multi-generations in the home, black families, white families, rural families, urban families, rich families, poor families, families across all different types of religious backgrounds, blended families, divorced families. The only thing these families had in common were these were families that he thought they seemed to work. They seemed to make it work somehow. And he wanted to know what the common theme was. And he found 6 of them. I don't know about you, but if I knew that there were 6 secrets to make my family work better, I'd want that. How about you? And so let's go through these tonight as we think about qualities of successful families and making families work tonight. The first quality that he found was that successful, functional families know how to express appreciation. Now, I'll just ask, all of these terms sound a little bit clinical in nature. In your own words, what does that mean? What does it mean to express appreciation? Anyone?
Somebody thank you.
They know how to say thank you. Ross, is there anything you do around the house that you feel like nobody noticed unless you quit doing it? Probably not. Any mothers here that feel that way? Shauna gives me a hard time. I try to help out around the house. But laundry is not my fun thing. And I hear a lot of mothers say, it's not that I mind doing the laundry. I just wish somebody would appreciate it. You see, friends, it doesn't cost us a thing. But it can improve and build any relationship if we just would say thank you more often. See, I don't know why we're wired this way. I'd like to ask the Lord. I've heard it takes 7 compliments to offset 1 insult. I've heard it takes 100. I don't know what the magic number is. My guess is it's probably different from person to person to person. But we tend to remember the insults. You all, especially those of you that are older, can tell me of things that somebody said to you that was hateful, that was unkind, that you did not appreciate. And you don't even know where the person is today. You couldn't tell me where they're at, but you hadn't forgot that they hurt you. We tend to remember the hurt. And we don't tend to be real expressive in our appreciation. Now, it works the other way too. For some parents out there that think, well, I just wish my kids would appreciate me, I can tell you, I deal with a lot of kids sometimes where they say, you know, I went to school all week last week and the principal didn't have to call my parents one time. That's a good day. But parents don't tend to say thank you about that. The story that I tell, JT doesn't give us a whole lot of problem, but here a year or so ago, maybe two, he got in a fight at school. And what do I focus on? Well, I focus on the one day that the principal had to call Shauna instead of the 6 years of good days that he gave me at school. I can say thanks, appreciate that. Principal didn't have to call me, and that's a good day, right? Now, real important. When you go to express appreciation, be sincere. I tell people, don't tell them that you appreciate it if you really don't. Be sincere about it, but it doesn't hurt to say thank you once in a while. It doesn't hurt. In fact, it builds the relationship in a way that we can't even begin to think about. If we would just say thank you. So oftentimes, the jobs we do around the house, whether it's your parents or your kids or whoever it is, the jobs we do, it's not that we mind doing it. We just want somebody to appreciate it. We just want to be heard. I could make 5 statements right now. You're a good person. I appreciate what you're trying to do. Your mother's no good, not good for anything, but I think you're a great person. Now, you all, if I was sincere, would remember the insults. But you would not remember the 3 compliments that I gave you. That's the way it works. Successful families, they work because they know how to express appreciation. Let me give you another one. And what I love about all of these is that, first of all, you're not starting out at ground one. You're going to find with some of these, you're going to say, yeah, our families, we got this one covered. We do that pretty well. But here's one that we could work on. You're not starting out at ground zero. Second thing, none of these are going to cost you any money. If you're like me, that's a good thing, because you don't have any money anyway, right? This isn't rocket science. Most of this you're going to say, well, yeah, that makes good sense. One thing that we can do, successful functional families know how to spend time together. Russ, what's one of your favorite childhood memories?
Camping.
Camping. Who were you with?
Family.
I've been given this basic lesson. We can go on to the next one. Been given basic lesson over the last 15 years or so in different places, in individual therapy, family therapy, in congregational settings, and in other places. And I'll ask people what their favorite childhood memory is. And they'll tell me these different things, and every single one of them have one thing in common. Oh, they'll talk about the trip that they made to Disney World. They'll talk about this big vacation. They'll talk about these different things that they did. But all of them, they were with their family. They went home. They spent time together. Now, the good news is it doesn't take I'm sorry, I'm getting really mixed up. The good news is it doesn't cost you any money. It doesn't have to cost you any money. Because you see, friends, you can stay at home on a Friday and play cards and be spending time together. But as you look at the different things that are going on, we live in a world where we're not spending as much time together. You have to be intentional about it. You've got to be real to the point that we've got to sit back and say, okay, this is what we're going to do as a family. What can we do to spend more time together? You see, we live in a world where we're always in a hurry. Oh, Bubba's got Taekwondo, and Sissy's got the flute lessons, and Mom's got a job, and Dad's got a job, and we got this to do with church, and we got this going on. And all these different things are happening, and we forget somewhere in the middle of it all, oh, I just don't spend much time. It's sad to see some of the kids and the way that they act out in different ways. Some of them will run and use drugs. Some of them will go and do other things. And as sad as some of that stuff is, it's really them crying out, I just want to be heard. I want to be seen and recognized. I want to spend time with my family. We need to be intentional and set forth and sit down and say, okay, this is what we can do as a family. One of the things that we try to do in the Northrop house, and I grew up this way, Every evening we try to sit down and have a meal together. I mean, old-fashioned, sit down around the table, turn off the TV, and spend just a little bit of time together as a family. That's what makes family work. When we're all spread out, it doesn't work. And the Bible teaches us this in such a great way. There's a passage right in the middle of the book of Mark that's right in the middle of a couple of significant miracles. And I want you to notice what it says. Jesus was speaking. He said to them, "Come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest for a while. For many were coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat." You see what Jesus was asking them to do? Let's get alone and spend some time together. They departed. The book of Matthew says they departed by themselves. They went off to another place and found the time to spend together. Successful families, they're going to spend time together, whether it's on vacation or in the home or doing these different things, but they're doing it together. I'll listen to young boys sometimes talk to me and say, used to my dad would do this with me or my mom would do this with me. And we go and I show the parents. They're crying out. They're wanting to spend time with you. That's pretty simple. That's pretty straightforward. Now, a trip to Disney World is going to cost you a lot of money. But playing cards on a Friday night doesn't cost you but $4 or $5. And that deck of cards will last you several weeks. You can spend time together, and it doesn't cost anything. Let's look at the next one. Another quality, and if you're over here thinking, man, I got two that I don't do very well. I don't express appreciation, and we're not spending as much time together. I got good news for you. You got this one covered. I've never met a family that doesn't have this one covered. Because the truth is, Chris, what would you do if I started talking bad about your family?
Probably get mad.
You're going to, there's no probably there. You are going to get upset. Now, the truth is, if Chris wanted to, he could probably tell me some dirt on my sister. And I can't get upset. But if I start talking bad about his family, he's going to get, don't you ever talk bad about my family to me, but I can talk bad about them all I want, right? Why? Because there's this sense of commitment. Just this natural sense of commitment in families. Now, for just a moment, let's be real about this. There's not a family represented here tonight that doesn't have problems. That doesn't have some things that we've got to work through. Things that have got to be, some challenges that have got to be worked through and worked on. We've got to be real about it. What I'll tell people is, you got to be careful. Do we need commitment? After 17 years of marriage, I can tell you, love doesn't take you that far. Commitment will carry you the distance. Do you have to have commitment? You have to have commitment when the trials and the heartache and all these things happen in our lives. We don't want so much commitment that we're blind to what's really going on. It is sad to me that there are women and men in this country who live in abusive situations. And they'll go and they'll talk and they have a way out. It's not that they're trapped. I am thinking of a lady who was being abused, ended up seeing a counselor about the matters. This was from a state where the counselor was not allowed to report what was going on. Her parents lived nearby. They opened up their home, said, "Come live with us. Let him get his life straightened out." She needed to get safe. And she would say things like, "No, it's not his fault. I shouldn't have done that." She was committed to that man, no doubt. So committed that she was blind to what was really going on. I'm afraid that sometimes in our families, we want to have the commitment. You've got to have it. It's not going to work without it. But friends, don't let your commitment blind you from what's really going on. Sometimes there are problems. There are things that go on in family. The passage that we have up here is a passage specifically about marriage. And I am impressed with the word there that it says they're no longer two, but one flesh. The idea is bonded, stuck to, cannot separate or get them apart. And I find it interesting that was the foundation that Christ, and consequently in Genesis, the same word was used when talked about the establishment of the home. The word that they used to make family work was this idea of stuck, bonded, one flesh. You can't even tell the difference. Friends, that's what makes family work. That's the foundation of the home that God puts for us. That's the commitment that He wants us to have. We're lacking it today. I don't have to tell you divorce is rampant and things are going on. We need commitment. Now, here's another one. Successful families, the study found, has good communication patterns. Again, not a surprise to any of us. In your own words, what might that mean? Good communication patterns. What's that mean? Russ, put it in your own words.
Communicating or talking with one another regularly.
You see, you broke the rule. You used the word to define the word. That doesn't help if you don't know what the word is. I'm joking. You did okay. They know how to talk. What would you like, Russ? Just straight up, be honest with me. What would you like Chloe to be able to talk to you about?
Anything.
Did you hear that? I've never heard another answer. I've asked parents this for years. What do you want your kids to be able to talk to you? Oh, I want my kids to talk to me about anything. Okay. They'll talk if you'll listen. But let me tell you something. Be ready. Because kids will talk about anything. You can talk about God's plan for marriage and sexuality, and I promise you, you can talk about drugs and you can talk about all these things that might be uncomfortable, and your kids are going to ask you questions about your past. Well, shut up, we're not talking about me. Yeah, that's what parents do. I've heard a lot of parents talk that, say exactly what Russ said. I want my kids to be able to talk to me about anything. What I've also seen are a lot of parents that, when push comes to shove, it's really not like that. It really doesn't work that way. Oh, it gets uncomfortable. You talk about Dad's past. You talk about what happened way back here. Hold on, wait a minute, I don't understand. Dad, I was thinking about drinking a beer the other day, and all of a sudden we want to avoid all that. We don't want to talk anymore. That's not going to make the family work. The family's going to work when you have that open communication. When the kids feel like, yeah, I can go talk to Dad about this. Because Mom and Dad, they're going to be real with me. They're going to tell me what it is. But parents, you better be ready to talk about anything. I remember it vividly. Right between Sunday Bible school and worship, JT comes up to me, he was a few years back, and he has some questions about sex. Well, I understand that might not have been the appropriate time to talk about it. But how easy it would have been to push that aside. Say, no, we'll talk about that later. And that's what parents tend to say. Well, we'll talk about that later. Don't worry. We'll talk about that later. But the problem is later never comes. Parents, let me encourage you. If you want to tell your kids, let's talk about it later, that's okay. Let me encourage you. Set up later right then. Set up later. Okay, listen. Friday night, you and I will go out. We'll go get something to eat. We can go for a drive, and you can talk to me about whatever's on your mind. Make sure, if you want to promise later, there's a time for that. I understand. Just make sure later comes. Make sure that you do talk about it later. One person said it this way. They were talking about preachers, but I thought it really fit parents. Said, flexible's too rigid. You got to be fluid. You got to learn to go with the flow because things are going to come up. The most interesting things come up around the dinner table when you talk with your kids. They end up saying things that you never thought, well, how do you end up on that conversation? But that good communication is important. And when they feel like they can come to you, be ready to talk about it. The preacher in me really likes this particular passage, talking about kindness and the way that we need to be with one another. Passage that Paul made mention of. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another just as God in Christ forgave you. Let me give you two more. I guess we got one more right now. And that is that successful families, he found, had a strong religious orientation. In your own words, Dad, what's that mean? This isn't that hard. Because I think about you every time I talk about this one. What's it mean? Strong religious orientation. Successful families do what?
Worship
They
together.
worship together. That's it. They go to church together. Now the preacher in me loves this one, right? If you want your family to work, hey, get the attendance up on Sunday, right? That'll happen. I want to remind you that this study took place in another place. This wasn't a religious study by any means. They were just trying to figure out what worked. And they studied people from all different religious backgrounds. But what they found was, if there was no religious background, the family didn't work as well. The family worked when they worshiped together. Now, the preacher didn't like that. What I say is, be his. Belong to him. Not only am I a preacher, most of you know I'm a preacher's kid. And Sundays are a busy day for preachers, aren't they? I mean, between the Bible school lesson and then the 2 sermons, and sometimes there's the nursing home service and the youth devotional, and 2 or 3 other things going on, it's not uncommon on a Sunday for a preacher to have 3 or 4 or 5 lessons, right, Russ? In one day. And I remember growing up there in Kansas City, Dad would always get up early on Sunday mornings, go to the church house, and I assume he was getting ready for his day because it was going to be a busy day. He'd always come back home and get the family, and we'd ride back together. Why? I mean, to this day it's that way. If we're together at Mom and Dad's on Sunday, we'll be in different cars, but we'll ride together to worship if we're going to worship together. That's just how it is, because it was very important to Dad that be something we do together. That be something we do as a family. We build that relationship. Now, I'm talking to a group of people that have come to a religious service on a Friday night, so I know that you're committed to your faith, and I appreciate that about you. I really do. Because oftentimes I talk to people and I listen to them say things like, well, yeah, we don't go to church like we should. Man, we used to go to church a lot, but we don't go much anymore, and things like this. What I want you to know is it helps your family to work. But only if it defines who you are. Let me pick at those who might go to services every time the doors are open, but maybe they don't live it out like they should in their day-to-day lives. Maybe in their private time they're doing things that they shouldn't do. That's not going to work. It's not just about going to church. It's about letting Christ define you. It was always wrong to lie in the house I grew up in. There were moral principles, things that were there. Believe me, I know by experience, it was always wrong to lie. There were moral principles that Mom and Dad made us adhere to. It wasn't just something that we did on Sunday. It's what we did throughout the week. The religious practice, the worship together, it defined who we are. Let me give you one more. Well, let's look at this passage first. I'm sorry, I keep going through this. Skipping over the passages, that's not too nice of me, is it? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your head. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. One person made the observation that God just expects us to talk about Him with our children 4 times a day. When we lie down, we rise up, when we walk by the way, and we say those different things. God expects us not to just be a religious congregation, but to be a spiritual family. And that's where it starts, in the home, and where it's going to be. One more, and that is that functional families, successful families, know how to deal with a crisis in a positive way. Chris, what might be an example of a family crisis? There's thousands.
Well, you live in Oklahoma tornadoes.
Tornado. If a tornado came into your house, that would be a crisis. What do you think, Ross? You got another one?
Low on money.
Look, financial problems can really be a crisis. Loss of a job, house burning down, death of a family member, serious car accident, filing bankruptcy. My point is, friends, when we talk about a crisis in the home, we're not talking about if a crisis is going to happen. It's when a crisis happens. They're going to happen. You don't live on this earth without a crisis. If you're here long enough, they're going to happen. In fact, what the research tends to show is crises tend to kind of piggyback one another. It's kind of a one right after the other. Father loses his job. That's a crisis, certainly. All of a sudden there's no money to pay rent. That's a crisis. The house gets foreclosed on. That could be a crisis. They don't know what they're going to do. That's a crisis. And you can look at the big picture and you see that, and it's all related. You see that. But friends, write this one down. We don't live in the big picture. We live moment to moment to moment. Crisis to crisis to crisis. Somebody gets in a car accident on the way home. That's a crisis. They're hospitalized. That's a crisis. Maybe there's some kind of debilitation after that. That's a crisis. Then you have the adjustment. That's a crisis. And you see it's all related. It makes sense. You look at it, you say, well, that's just kind of the natural progression of things. But we don't live in the big picture. We live moment to moment. Crisis to crisis. Be aware. Friends, crises, they're going to happen. And mark it down. They will either build your family up or they will tear your family down. They'll make you or they will break you. It'll make you bitter or it will make you better. But I promise you, the crisis is going to change you one way or another. I was standing in the back of the auditorium. This has been 4 or 5 years ago now. Waiting, as preachers often do. They would come out and shake hands and everyone was leaving. There was one gentleman kind of standing off to the side. I could tell he was wanting to talk to me. So we waited around, and sure enough, it came down to it, and he come over to Brother Chairman, we need to talk to you. Okay. So I go into my office, and here is the gentleman and his wife and their daughter and the daughter's boyfriend. I knew what had happened. And sure enough, their daughter was pregnant. Would that be a crisis? Absolutely. And folks, I kid you not, her parents almost got divorced over that incident. Why? Because they didn't know how to deal with a crisis in a positive way. I talk to big brothers and fathers sometimes about their daughters. What would you do if that happened to you? Oh, I'd kill him. And then I'd go find the man and I'd kill him too. Well, that's nice, and I understand. I got sisters of my own. I get it. But that's not going to deal with the crisis in a positive way. That's not going to help anything. You see, at the end of the day, we've got a child coming into this world. We have something that the family is going to have to work through. Things are going to have to work. And they've got to deal with this crisis in a positive way. How do you do that? Well, I want to know about the guy. I do. I want to know, is he going to be a stand-up guy or not? We have a child coming into the world that's going to need some good influence, going to need some people in his life. Big brothers can be that uncles can be that good influence at times. That's the way it works. The bottom line is you have a crisis that you've got to work through. Death is a crisis. One person said, the only way through grief is through it. And I think that's absolutely true. There's no way around it. You're going to get through it. But you've got to work through the crisis in a positive way. All right, I've given 6 of them here. Well, no, let's get the passage. Let's get the passage. James 1, verses 2 and 3. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. Certainly, God was clear that crises were going to happen in our lives. I've given you 6 qualities, 6 attributes of successful families. Let me put them all up here. Successful families know how to express appreciation, spend time together, have high degrees of commitment. They have good communication patterns, strong religious orientation, the ability to deal with a crisis in a positive way. I want to pick on the same guys that I've been picking on. Chris, looking at those, if all of them were important, one of them might be just a little bit more important than the rest. Which one do you think that might be?
Strong religious orientation.
I could see why you would think that. Sorry, you're wrong. Ross, you're down to 5. You want to try?
Ability to deal with crisis in a positive way.
Good job. You got it. So you're a little smarter than Curtis, see that? All right. That's exactly it. He found families and interviewed families that may not have the religious orientation that we talked about, may not have the ability to express appreciation like they should, may not have the good communication, as good of communication patterns. They usually had it all, but maybe not quite as good as what he thought. But he said, if you showed me a family that didn't know how to deal with a crisis in a positive way, you would show me a family that was doomed to fail every single time. I believe it's because, friends, crises are not an if kind of thing. It's when. They're going to happen from day to day, living in this world. Things are going to happen. Bad things do happen to good people. We have to experience crises from time to time. But if we don't know how to deal with it in a positive way, it's going to tear your family apart. Be ready. Be aware. Crises are going to happen. And they have to happen. Now, if we were sitting in a counseling session, and the therapist were to come out for just a little bit, in a family counseling session, this is generally the information that I would give any family the first time that I sat with them. In church work especially, I've had more families come back to me and tell me, you remember that time you shared with us those qualities of successful families? And they say something like, that's been the best help for us. Of all the material that you shared, that was the most for us. I hope it's beneficial for you. What I want you to know is I'm not your therapist. What I've done tonight is give you the tools to make your family work. Sometimes it's just a simple tool to fix the job. A lot of leaky faucets can be fixed with a wrench. And I am impressed with the wrench. It is such a simple tool. There's nothing to it. You think, how hard is this? But do you ever notice that when you need a wrench, only a wrench will work? I mean, you can try a pair of pliers, you can try a pair of scissors, you can try it with your hands, but you can't get the job done without the right tool for the right job. But friends, I can give you the wrench. Until you pick it up and use it, it doesn't do you any good. I've given you the tools. Tools that can make your family work. And some of you may be thinking, Jeremy, you do this with your family? Yes. Well, about once a year, Shauna and I take our work date and we try to go out. We review some of this. Now we include the kids in it. Are we doing this? Are there things we could do to do this better? And it will make your family work in a great way if you'll pick the tools up and use them. Leave them sitting there. It's not going to do anything for you at all. I hope it's beneficial to you, and I hope that it helps you. Let's pray together, and then we'll offer our invitation. Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for the blessing of being able to come here tonight. I pray for the families represented here. I ask that you be with them. Let us all turn to you for guidance and for strength. Thank you for creating the home. We pray that we can have good homes that will bring glory and honor to your name. In the name of Jesus. Amen. You realize that this lesson was not